James Gunn's Superman claps back at online haters with a hilarious meta scene while smashing records and reviving the DCU with hope and heart. Welcome to Stats In. If you're just joining us, please subscribe and don't forget to turn on notifications bell for more video. The scene in question lands midway through Superman after he turns himself in for an investigation due to escalating political tensions. The government outsources his imprisonment to Lex Luthor, who doesn't waste time and banishes our hero to a pocket dimension. As Lex gives Superman a tour of the dimension he built, we see a group of super-intelligent and tech-savvy monkeys controlled by the antagonist. Their only job is to flood social media with anti-Superman propaganda, posting comments like, "Only an idiot will still back Superman." This sequence seems to be placed in for laughs, but it is a cutting commentary on the toxic corner of the fandom that has harassed Gunn and threatened to ruin his project ever since it was announced. Unfortunately, some of these haters were fans of Zack Snyder's DCU and didn't want Gunn to take the helm. James Gunn had a blink-and-you-miss plot moment in Superman that was bold, hilarious, and a meta clapback to his loudest critics. He didn't just reboot the Man of Steel, but also the entire narrative around the DC universe, and that also includes the haters. We can all agree that at times, some members of a fandom can turn into toxic and brainless folks who spew venom. David Corenswet had to face loads of backlash because Henry Cavill was no longer the last son of Krypton. And James Gunn's DCU at large was being doubted, with many netizens trash-talking over it, but it seems like he might have shut their mouths once and for all, not just through the movie's excellent outcome, but also a specific scene. James Gunn puts his money where his mouth is because Superman is soaring past every benchmark with great momentum. The movie pulled in $22.5 million during previews, which means it has the biggest preview haul of 2025, via Variety. Projections suggest that its global debut weekend will surpass $200 million. But it seems like Superman will cross that number because the ratings are rising as well. With an 82% critic score and a 95% audience score, it is quite likely that the movie will probably reach its break-even figures by next weekend, via Rotten Tomatoes. They were even set to launch coordinated campaigns to tank Superman before its release by mass ticket reservations, spreading spoilers, and negative reviews online, via Independent. So, by referring to them as super smart monkeys, Gunn not only calls out their elitist attitude, but also frames them as a herd of creatures with no original thought. He shows how they are building on each other's hatred and existing in an echo chamber. But the filmmaker has targeted not just these individuals but everyone who didn't believe in his version of Superman and questioned how he would make this work at all, in an extremely harsh way. Early reviews of Gunn Superman have praised his direction for bringing back a colorful and hopeful vibe that was missing from the previous DC films. Plus, the cast's performances have been absolutely incredible, with Krypto the Superdog winning everyone's heart. So, it's clear that James Gunn's DCU is off to a flying start, and the movie is everything the haters feared it might become. The director took the heat and turned it into comedy gold. But what did you think about the monkey scene? Was it a hilarious mic drop or two on the nose? James Gunn's Superman and Zack Snyder's Man of Steel are put to the test in this direct comparison between the two directors and their universes. Welcome to Stats In. If you're just joining us, please subscribe and don't forget to turn on notifications bell for more video. I was one of those people who thought that no one could ever beat Henry Cavill's portrayal of Superman in Zack Snyder's DCU. However, looking at the James Gunn flick, I think that David Corenswet is indeed the better Superman in terms of almost everything. James Gunn's Superman has been released to the world, and the reviews have been great. Although many doubted Gunn's capabilities for handling such a big IP, including me, the director has proved himself again with his abilities and the will to run the DCU. After watching Superman, we couldn't help but compare Gunn's take on the classic superhero versus Zack Snyder's version in his 2013 film Man of Steel. Well, here's the definitive comparison about the two Supermans and which of the two directors did it better. Although Amy Adams' Lois Lane was supposed to be the tough journalist who doesn't need anyone by her side, she ended up being just a love interest for Henry Cavill's Superman in the DCU. The Superman ending explained what happened to Ultraman and Lex Luthor. Being the symbol of hope, James Gunn's take on the iconic character was much better than Zack Snyder's darker and grittier take in his DCU universe. Henry Cavill's Clark Kent looked like he was fighting for his survival in Man of Steel and the DCU. However, David Corenswet's Superman felt like he was fighting for his love of humanity and was hopeful about Earthlings, not just himself. Considering how Clark Kent was always raised as a character who would put humanity first and himself later on, I do believe that naivety was seen on David Corenswet's face as he assumed everyone on Earth to be a good human, unlike Henry Cavill's Man of Steel. Hence, I think that David Corenswet is the better Superman of the two. Although the role of Jor-El and Lara Lor-Van was portrayed by Bradley Cooper and Angela Sarafian in James Gunn's Superman, they weren't as good as Zack Snyder's casting in the 2013 film Man of Steel. Ayelet Zurer and Russell Crowe had a phenomenal performance as Superman's biological parents in Man of Steel, especially how Ayelet Zurer's Lara Lor-Van was shown as a ferocious woman who would do anything to defend her son. The video message from Bradley Cooper and Angela Sarafian served as a key plot point in the James Gunn flick. But, for me, I think that Zack Snyder did it better with Man of Steel. With less and less screen time, Amy Adams' portrayal of Lois Lane was reduced to being a damsel in distress rather than helping out Superman. In the case of the DCU flick, Rachel Brosnahan's portrayal of Lois Lane was as iconic as it can be, thanks to James Gunn's comments. Throughout the movie, there has been no single scene where David Corenswet's Clark Kent saves Lois Lane from a calamity. Instead, it's Lois Lane who ends up rescuing Superman when things get tough for the Man of Steel. Naturally, Rachel Brosnahan had the better portrayal of Lois Lane than Amy Adams. Songs for the fight scenes in the James Gunn flick were quite iconic, as the scene of Mr. Terrific fighting off everyone while the music amps up for the audience was simply breathtaking. The music for Man of Steel was composed by legendary composer Hans Zimmer. Although the composer refused to use John Williams' Imperial March, the composition for fight scenes and intense moments was done better by Hans Zimmer. Despite a controversial choice of not using the Imperial March, the point for the best music goes to Man of Steel. James Gunn has a knack for adding songs from the 60s and the 80s into almost every movie that he has ever directed. Of course, choosing to use a new version of John Williams' Imperial March was the best decision that composer John Murphy made for Superman. There is more to the movie than meets the eye. On the other hand, James Gunn's decision to have some continuous shots felt more natural and smooth in terms of the screenplay. Mr. Terrific's fight scene, Kal-El's laser beaming everyone in the sky, and the anti-proton river leading into a black hole felt smooth and natural. However, Zack Snyder's Man of Steel often felt clunky and jittery at times, as there were no clear transitions from one scene to the other. Therefore, I preferred Superman's cinematography over Man of Steel. Well, this was a tough call to make. I mean, both directors have done a remarkable job in terms of cinematography for Man of Steel as well as Superman. Zack Snyder's fight scenes felt somewhat unnatural and forced, as it was often a barrage of punches and kicks until they picked him up and threw him to a different scene set, not to say that it wasn't bad. But, considering that Superman's fighting scenes shouldn't feel clunky and should have a smooth progression, the fight scenes in James Gunn's Superman are better than Zack Snyder's Man of Steel. We're in the end. Rachel Brosnahan's impactful role in Superman will boost her profile for Apple TV Plus's show, benefiting both her career and the show's viewership. Welcome to Stats In. If you're just joining us, please subscribe and don't forget to turn on notifications bell for more video. The Superman actress recounts a moment when James Gunn was motivating the actors to be prepped up for the role. In an interview with Slash Film, Brosnahan told how Gunn got them to intensely think about their character's depth. She said, "Gunn just forced us to think a little bit more deeply about it. There are certain things that you enter these fantastical worlds and sometimes the impulse can just, rather than, what if it were real? To be like, well, that's true, and maybe not go a whole lot deeper than that." This thing might have shaped the actress for her future endeavors in acting.